And now I would like to introduce today's special guest. If you had to pick one word to apply to the world's financial markets these past few months, that would be turmoil. Stock markets around the world are reacting convulsively to fears that the crisis in the US housing market could undermine the global economy, and consequently, individual economies are being affected, if not undermined. Our guest today makes his living studying the developing economies in Asia and the Pacific, studying them and forecasting what they're going to do next. Dr. Ifzal Ali is the chief economist of the Asian Development Bank, which last week released its flagship document, the Asia Development Outlook for 2008. The outlook looks at 40 economies in developing Asia, which are the fastest expanding in the world, providing comprehensive analysis and forecasts. As chief economist for the bank, it was Dr. Ali's unenviable task to predict what effect there might be on that region's economies if the US actually slips into a recession, as many fear will happen. What will the likely response be to rising inflation and a slowdown in global growth? Will that slowdown be reflected in supercharged economies in China and India? For investors and other market watchers the world over, these aren't just interesting questions. They are of critical importance, and the predictions of experts like Dr. Ali are watched with almost obsessive interest. Dr. Ali holds a PhD in economics from Johns Hopkins University, a master's degree from the Delhi School of Economics, and a bachelor's degree from St. Stephen's College, also in Delhi. I'll now give over the podium to Dr. Ali, who will today provide us with the details in the Asian Development Outlook. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Chief Economist of the Asian Development Bank, Dr. Ifzal Ali.
Thank you, Noella. And I thank the Canadian Club for giving us this opportunity to share some of our thoughts and findings with you on issues arising out of a very exciting global environment. At the outset, it is what the topic of my conversation with you this afternoon would be on developing Asia amidst a global economic slowdown. In doing this, it is very important to recognize that Asia as a whole, which includes East Asia, Southeast Asia, South Asia, entered 2008 on a very strong note. Developing Asia had a growth rate of 8.7% in 2007, the highest in the last 19 years. And this growth was not only powered by countries like India and China, but growth picked up very appreciably even in countries like the Philippines and Indonesia, which were the hardest hit after the 1997 financial crisis. In fact, the Philippines grew at 7.3% in 2007, the highest in the last 30 years. Indonesia grew at 6.3%, the highest in a decade. So going forward, Asia has enormous momentum in its favor. But there was one main change that occurred in 2007 as compared to the past years. In the past, it was always high growth, low inflation. 2007, high growth, but signs of inflation picking up across the board. And when we look at the average inflation figures for 2007, while they were low, what was important to recognize that as we entered the third and the fourth quarters, inflation started picking up very sharply. For example, in China, inflation which was little over 4.5% for the year as a whole, by November, December had already reached 6.7%. Vietnam, which has been the star performer in Asia year in and year out, inflation had reached 12.7% by year end. And as we enter 2008, what is happening is inflation is picking up in many parts of Asia. So that is the basic backdrop against which I will make my presentation this afternoon. But as was pointed out by Noella, Asia is now part of a global community, highly integrated both from the trade as well as from the investment side. Now, for that reason, what happens in the industrialized countries have major implications for what happens in Asia. Now, for 2008, the most fundamental change that we have made in our assessment is that the subprime crisis, its fallout is not going to be confined only to the United States. There will be a coincident slowdown in the G3. This is important for the Asian producers and exporters because with a slowdown in the United States, they cannot move to other new markets. There will not be other new markets, at least in the foreseeable future. Secondly, the other element in the global scene which is very, very important for Asia is what is happening with food and fuel prices. With fuel prices, that is of critical importance to developing Asia because the vast majority of countries import vast quantities of oil. Oil prices which have been going up at about $10 a barrel since 2002, this is going to continue. We foresee it at $85 a barrel this year, $95 a barrel next year. And while there will be volatility, it was $111 a barrel yesterday, but these are the fundamentals. Higher oil prices translate into higher prices for natural gas. That in turn translates into higher prices for fertilizer. Fertilizer prices have almost tripled in the last 2 years. This leads to higher prices in soft commodities which are important for Asia. Rice prices, which have been in the news almost every day, have almost doubled in 6 months. Wheat prices have doubled in 2 years. Edible oil prices have doubled in 2 years. And this edible oil price increase is being aggravated by this move to biofuels. So it is against this backdrop that we have made our assessment for Asia. The important thing to note is that while there has been a lot of talk about decoupling between the industrialized North and the Asian countries, if you look at the data, it's a myth. There is no decoupling at all, particularly on the trade side. If you look at high-frequency data over the last 12 months, there has been a remarkable and a very dramatic slowdown in exports from developing Asia to the industrialized countries, be it computers, be it footwear, be it garments, be it sports equipment. And what we find is that with the passage of every quarter, it is not only negative, but it is becoming larger. When this happens, what will be the impact of a slowdown in the G3 on developing Asia? Our assessment is if there is a 1% decline in growth in the G3 over 2 years, growth in developing Asia within 12 months will drop by 0.6 percentage points. Exports will drop by 2 percentage points. And both consumption and investment will fall. What is more interesting is that if this drop in GDP growth rate is accompanied by a 10% depreciation of the US dollar against all currencies except the Hong Kong currency, which is pegged to the US dollar, growth will drop by 1.6 percentage points. Exports, instead of falling by 2 percentage points, will fall by 4 percentage points. Now, it is in that sense that it's the currency which is more important than the generalized slowdown in terms of Asian exports to the industrialized North. In this regard, we are already witnessing a fundamental shift in currency markets. There is a appreciation both in nominal as well as in real terms of Asian currencies. You may be aware that as of yesterday, the Chinese yuan, which was pegged for a long time at 8.28 to the US dollar, has now slipped to below 7. You look at the Thai baht, you look at the Filipino peso, you look at the Indian rupee, you look at the Singapore dollar, they are all appreciating. And mind you, as long as China shows greater flexibility with its currency regime, other countries will show even more flexibility. What does this mean for the industrialized North, including Canada? What it means is, with inflationary pressures building up within Asia, with Asian currencies appreciating both in nominal and in real terms, the deflationary pressures which kept prices under control in the industrialized North, that period is over. That's one thing to remember about the impact of the G3 slowdown and the implications for the rest of Asia. The other side to notice and to note is that within Asia there is a major movement away from the export sector to higher domestic consumption and higher domestic investment. For example, in China we talk about a harmonious society. In India we talk about inclusive growth. What does this mean? This means there's going to be much greater emphasis on domestic consumption, domestic investment, and this in turn would contribute to an orderly unwinding of the global imbalances which have been so destabilizing for the global world. Now, from the forces that I have described, growth will slow down in Asia as a result of what is going on in the industrialized countries. Growth will slow from 8.7% in 2007 to 7.6% in 2008 to 7.8% in 2009. By any reckoning, these are still very impressive growth rates. But the point I'm trying to make is, while the contagion effect will impact on Asia and there will be a slowdown, Asia is not going to lurch down. Now, as we go forward, what are the factors that will keep Asia so dynamic? There are two sets of factors. Number one, the Asian countries have put in place both macro and microeconomic policies which provide a conducive investment and business climate in which to operate. Secondly, this improved business climate has led to modernization, technological improvements, and most importantly, productivity improvements. These basic forces that are at play, whether you talk about China, you talk about India, you talk about Vietnam, they are all, there's an enormous amount of momentum which will keep these changes in motion. And it is in this context that you will see Asia remaining the most dynamic region in the world, notwithstanding what is going on in the G3. Before coming here, I was speaking to another audience, and the one way I can describe that is that in the past, if the US sneezed, Asia would have to take some antibiotics. Today, a couple of aspirins will do. And for these reasons, I think as we go forward, Asia will remain dynamic. But in doing so, over the next 2 or 3 years, it will have to contend with some major risks. One is they have to get inflation under control. Because in countries that are still relatively poor, inflationary pressures do two things which are highly undesirable. It increases, inflation is a regressive tax, and food price inflation is the most regressive of all taxes. So both the incidence and the severity of poverty increase. Finally, what inflation does is that it undermines productivity improvements, which are the pillar for continued progress. Thirdly, the slowdown in the G3 will lead to the emergence of protectionist pressures across the industrialized countries. That's one aspect. Secondly, we are already witnessing protectionist pressures on the investment side. The sovereign wealth funds, of which you must be all aware of, are coming under increasing scrutiny and increasing regulation. To answer this, developing Asia has got to open up its trade sectors basically to allay the concerns of the industrialized North. To close, all I would like to say is that while developing Asia is not immune to the G3 slowdown that we are currently witnessing, neither is it a hostage to it. Thank you very much.
I'll just ask you some questions. Thanks for agreeing to take questions, Dr. Ali. I have a few questions, probably from the students and our audience. Our first question, does taxing of carbon emission impact Asia disproportionately?
One thing that has become very clear in developing Asia is that its vaunted growth has come at a very high cost in terms of the environment. What we are witnessing now is, as a result of climate change, global warming, snow caps are melting, the incidence of floods are increasing, water levels are dropping, salinity levels are rising, agricultural productivity is falling. So it is in the enlightened self-interest of Asia that climate change, global warming are tackled head-on. And in this context, I think the carbon tax, if looked at it in this perspective, would lead to a win-win situation for not only developing Asia, but to the world as a whole.
Thank you. What are we doing to open up trade sectors in places like Korea?
Well, Korea has a stellar record in terms of having very few either tariff or non-tariff barriers. That's one aspect. Secondly, this is a country that for the last 7 years has allowed its currency to appreciate both in nominal and in real terms very appreciably. On both counts, I think Korea is an exemplar which provides a good practice for many other countries to follow suit.
Thank you, Dr. Ali. How do you feel China may be impacted from the Olympics economically?
I think from an immediate point of view, the slowdown in exports as a result of the G3 slowdown will be compensated by the huge inflows into Beijing as a result of the Olympics. So it will provide a short-term boost in the arm to service sector income in China.
Thank you. Do you have any confidence that Canada can avoid a recession?
I think people in this room are probably better positioned to answer that question than me. But given the close linkages that Canada has with the US, perhaps I think the answer lies more in what will happen in the US.
Thank you. A couple more. Could you comment on the impact of rising food prices on Asia and developing countries? I think you mentioned a bit about this in your speech.
I think this impact of rising food prices is going to cause a fundamental shift not only in Asia but in the rest of the world. Developing Asia, as it grows, has to be kept fed, and as it grows more prosperous, it will have to be fed more. So both in terms of productivity improvements in agriculture within Asia, we will see that we will revisit what happened in the 70s and 80s with the advent of the Green Revolution in Asia. We are likely to see over the next 5-6 years something similar. But in the meantime, I think it is going to be a bonanza for countries like Canada, United States, Brazil, and Australia. High food prices, it will be for the producers of these soft commodities, it's going to be very prosperous times.
Thank you. Can you comment on the impact on Japan by developing Asia?
Japan is the most important player in Asia. It is the second largest economy in the world. It's a $4.4 trillion economy. Japan has very close trading relationships with both the East Asian economies as well as the Southeast Asian economies. Currently and ironically, Japan is benefiting more from the buoyancy in developing Asia than contributing to that buoyancy, because the export markets or the export destinations of Japan to China, to Korea, to other parts of Southeast Asia, as these countries prosper, have become very important growth engines, particularly for the industrial belt that is in the Kansai, Osaka region of Japan.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ali. That's it for all our questions, and I really appreciate you answering them so thoughtfully and so giving us so much time. I'd like to call on John Cape now to thank Dr. Ali. Thank you, Dr.
It is my great pleasure to have the opportunity to thank Dr. Ali for his fascinating and informative speech here today. As Noella said in introducing Dr. Ali, predictions about what developing Asian economies are going to do is a great deal more than just an intellectual exercise. Anyone who has an interest or involvement in today's financial markets is aware of how important those markets now are. As the American economist Larry Summers said, the dramatic modernization of the Asian economies ranks alongside the Renaissance and the Industrial Revolution as one of the most important developments in economic history. We all need to pay attention to what is happening on the other side of the world, because in this technology-enabled economy of the 21st century, the other side of the world is just a keyboard click away. Dr. Ali and the Asia Development Outlook have provided us with a useful and important tool for monitoring a critical part of the world, and we are extremely grateful for it. On behalf of the Canadian Club of Toronto, Dr. Ali, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. This wraps up today's program, which was broadcast live on Rogers Television and will be rebroadcast in the days to come. Thank you on behalf of the Canadian Club. This meeting is now adjourned.